Welcome, everybody. John Aravosis here. Today, we're very pleased to have Congressman Eric Swalwell of California with us. Congressman, thank you for joining us. You're in,
of course, John.
California, right?
I'm in California. I'm in Castro Valley, which is right at the heart of my district in the East Bay.
Right. Now, have you guys been coming back and forth then? I guess you've been having to, no?
I've been limiting my back and forth, but this week, especially with unemployment insurance running out, I wanted to get home before we get called back to hopefully vote on that and just see the need. And so I just came from a Meals to Wheels food bank service that I was helping out. And I'll tell you, the need is there, and
Right.
It's very hard to see, so many folks who probably never imagined themselves 6 months ago being in a line like that.
I was just curious. I mean, I want to jump into coronavirus and the economy, but has the speaker looked into whether you can do distance voting for your mail-in voting, so to speak, but I mean for the House, that you guys can vote distance, or is that just not even a possibility?
So we are in a way, and I actually, made a push for this back in February. I have long had legislation that would allow Congress to vote remotely in a situation like this, but this pandemic, really forced the conversation, and the speaker has allowed proxy voting. So people can show up in person and carry someone else's vote and just, vote by proxy. But also, I had called for committee hearings to be remote, and the good news is that committee hearings are now working and functioning remotely. So we've seen Congress, adjust with the times too. My preschooler, he does some of his classes by Zoom, and so many Americans are working right now, by Zoom or WebEx, and working remotely. And it's time Congress does as well. And so it's been an adjustment, but it was needed.
Yeah. Let's jump right in. I think I know, had already tweeted about the Jonathan Swan Axios interview with Trump that was done a few days ago, but it finally, I guess the whole thing was published last night. So we all got to see clips today. Really kind of not surprising, but also horrific at the same time.
Yeah, why did he agree to that?
I don't know. Well, Swan isn't a pushover. I mean, from the beginning, he's always had that, I would almost say, a foreigner's ability the foreign press seems a little edgier than our guys sometimes, I think, even though I like our guys.
And John's an American.
Oh, is he? I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's a citizen. He may have been born.
He sounds Australian.
I think Australian native, but yeah, he's a U.S. citizen now. But he is a tough interviewer. Doesn't care which side you're on, and the president, looked like the kid who was being grilled by the teacher and hadn't done his homework.
Yeah,
it was. Sometimes you have secondhand embarrassment. I had secondhand embarrassment watching that.
A number of people had tweeted that when I put up the video this morning. Some woman wrote me back and said, "I'm actually embarrassed for him." And I don't even but it really. How did we get to this point?
A country that imperfect, but a country that has been great, many times, and has stood up and addressed many challenges over 240 plus years. It is hard to see what's happened in just 3.5 years to our country. The president has brought this country, to its knees, and we need someone who's going to, pick us up, and move us forward. But he's not capable of doing that in another term.
I sort of see two sub-issues there when we start talking about how this all happened. One of which is, how can somebody like Trump still have 40% support? Because I've talked about it on the podcast a lot, it's really sort of scared me as a student of history, seeing this happen here, because I think we've often, even as Democrats, right? I certainly have a sense of America's exceptionalism, warts and all. Sort of Ted Kennedy's approach, right? Always fighting for something better, but always saying this is a great country, but it's great because we can become better, right? But the idea that 40% of the country still supports this man, it worries me. It worries me on a much deeper level that Trump could happen again. And frankly, we could get a smarter Trump next time, and then we're really in trouble.
We are only saved by his incompetence. He's corrupt, but he's incompetent. And he has competent people enabling his corruption. We've certainly seen that. But John, I'm really confident that the American people are resilient and that they will want to climb out of this. And he's not going to be reelected. And sometimes as Democrats, we fight the last war, and we look at this like it's 2016, and Hillary had a lead at this point, and Trump came back and surprised all of us. he's the president now, so it's a referendum on the incumbent. He's presiding over the worst economy since the Great Depression. His failures of leadership, from the pandemic to racial justice matters, have been exposed. And so I would rather be us than them. And we have a candidate who is seen as a seasoned hand. And when I ran for president, before the pandemic happened, before we finally made progress on racial justice, what I was hearing across the country was great. I'm glad someone from the next generation is running, but too much is at stake, to roll the dice on a generational leader. And that was hard to hear, but that reflected that for too many people, they just could not tolerate a second term of Donald Trump. And that's why I think Biden is perfectly suited to beat him in November.
Right. Are we able to unwind everything Trump has done by simply electing Biden? And I don't just mean policy-wise, but I worry that Trump has set so many precedents and exposed so many flaws in the system itself, right? I mean, we thought Congress would be the counterpoint to the president, and guess what? It's not. No fault of your own.
Yeah. We're a third of the way up the mountain, right? We've won the House, and we're no longer helpless. We're able to,
thank God. Yeah.
Thank God. We're able to conduct oversight. We're able to fund or defund, priorities of the president, to leverage that oversight. And, we've been able to advance, a lot of issues that we were not able to advance in years past. But we need to have that holy trinity, the White House, the Senate, and the House. And that's all within reach this coming election. And when we do that, I think the first 100 hours, it's going to be, fulfilling the relief need that's there around coronavirus on the healthcare side, on distributing a vaccine, making sure that we still have testing, tracing, and treatments. But then we're going to be on a road to recovery, and that's going to mean investments in infrastructure, investments in rural broadband, and greening the economy, the economy with clean energy projects and bridges and roads and tunnels that'll need to be constructed and can put people back to work. So I think there's a lot that we can do, in the first 100 hours on relief, and then the first 100 days on recovery.
What do we do about Bill Barr and the rest of them once Biden comes in? Do we just wipe our hands and say, the way Democrats do, and to some degree in the past, I've supported it, right? Obama came in and we sort of ignored Bush. And a lot of people didn't like it, but I sort of understood it. Obama had to, again, we had an economic crisis Obama had to focus on. But now there's a part of me that feels, put aside the revenge, how do we show Washington that our government should not function this way unless we hold people responsible for our government functioning this way? People like Bill Barr, but frankly, Donald Trump as well. Do we just forgive them and move on? I mean,
we don't forget and move on, but we also want people to be held accountable in a credible way that the public believes. And so what I propose is a presidential crimes commission to look at whether the president or anyone who worked for him, committed crimes, and have an independent commission of, experts and prosecutors, people who are not, aligned with the current administration or the new administration, but can recommend, how people should be held accountable. Because I think it's going to need to have that type of credibility to not be perceived as, political punishment. And I don't want to do, I don't want to do Trump justice, because in Trump justice, the facts don't matter. It's really about, helping your friends and punishing your enemies. We don't want to punish our enemies. We want to make sure that the rule of law still means something in our country, and it has to be independent. And that's, I think, the best way to go about it. We've done that before in history, and I think we may have to do that post-Trump.
It's a matter of Congress being able to enforce its subpoena power. I understand the need for justice to set an example for future actors, but I'm more concerned about somehow fixing the system, because clearly the checks and balances aren't working. And we've got to define the problem first, which means we've got to have somebody look into what Trump did, and we figure out how to fix it so that a Democrat can't do this in the future either. It's really
right.
Both, but it's spinning it that way, which, the Republicans, of course, they're going to say we're having a witch hunt and blah, blah, blah. That's just a given. But,
Republicans are going to rue the day that they voted against, so many accountability measures that we tried to put forward that they would want on some future Democratic president, like whistleblower protections. They used to care about protecting whistleblowers. And I promise, when they're in the wilderness and it's a Democratic administration and they have concerns about whatever, they're going to want whistleblowers to be protected and able to come forward. And they have consistently voted against that, and so many other measures. And I tell them all the time, John, that there is going to be a post-president. Donald Trump is not always going to be president. There's going to be a president after Donald Trump. And just be careful how far you go to protect him, because you may lose the ability to ever hold, a Democratic president accountable. And I would want to hold a corrupt Democratic president accountable if that ever presented itself. And they have voted against every means of which we'd be able to do that.
But I think they know you will. I think they know that A, a Democrat probably will never do the kind of things Trump did, and B, even a Democrat, look, even with Bill Clinton, I remember back then, I mean, I was just a consultant or whatever, but I remember I supported him, but I remember talking to a friend of mine and saying, I don't want him impeached, but I kind of wish I could just wake up and magically he was gone. Just because I wanted to, I love Bill Clinton. I defend him to the death to this day. And I tick off a lot of people on the left for doing it. But it was so much trouble at that point that I just wished he'd gone. And my point there is, I think even though a lot of people defending Clinton, we are more honest. And frankly, what Clinton did was, this compared to what Trump has done.
Right.
But in any case, I mean, I think the Republicans know that we're not going to steal a Supreme Court seat. We're not going to do the kind of crazy. We're not going to let a plague ravage the country and mum ourselves because, hey, it's our guy.
Right. And I think it's what Lieutenant Colonel Vindman said. Right matters. Right still matters. And I hope that's a value that not just Democrats care about, but everyone cares about. That doing what's right has to matter.
What do we do about the Fox News problem? And I say that in the sense of, I worry that part of the coronavirus problem, not a part, let's face it, is, the fake news, but the real fake news. We're having a problem because the Republicans control their own media that basically just spouts lies, and we can't get around it. I have family members I'm arguing with this about who still are telling me, I think it's really just a flu. And I'm going, guys, it's not like a conspiracy of health experts.
Right. So I take most invitations from Fox to go, on their show, defend what we believe in, speak to what I call Fox News bystanders, people who may not have controlled the channel being, turned to Fox, but they're still, watching because either their spouse or their boss or someone around them has it on. So I want to make sure we're communicating to those folks, but also anyone that did turn it on themselves. I don't want to write them off, and I want to defend what we believe in, because as I said, I think right matters, and we're on the side of right in this battle versus right and wrong. And so we can't just, give up on them. And so go into that, Fox den, if you will. And, I think we may not win all of them, but we can at least, defend ourselves because it's clear what they're doing over there to, be in many ways, especially their evening hosts, state media for the president.
It's funny. I used to go on Fox a lot, but back in like the 2000s on gay rights issues, O'Reilly used to have me on back in like the early part of the 2000s when O'Reilly actually started to have a little bit of a crack in the veneer. He was actually, he ended up being very supportive on a lot of gay stuff, or gay back then. And I stopped going along with a lot of other folks on the left just because Fox went so crazy that, but it's interesting you raised that, because I was surprised when I would go on, and mind you, this is 20 years ago, and people would see me, or either I get emails, or people would actually see me and go, I didn't necessarily agree with you, but that was really interesting. Like, you really made me and frankly, they liked, and I put you in the same boat, they liked that somebody on the left was presenting themselves as a reasonable person and presenting a reasonable argument. Because they don't even, because of what Fox says, they don't even imagine there are people like us.
That's right. And people have come up to me before as I've gone across the country and pulled me aside and have said, I watch you on Fox News. And then they look around and they say, I didn't turn the channel there. My husband did. But, keep at it. Keep going on there. And it's usually women, right? But again, it just shows me that we can't write them off. We should keep engaged. And I don't go on Tucker Carlson anymore. I think he's embraced.
Do you go on Hannity?
Yeah.
I've never.
No.
My mom made me promise 20 years ago to never go on Hannity.
I do Martha McCallum's show. I think she's tough and fair. I've done Chris Wallace, as you've probably heard the president complained to Chris Wallace that Chris Wallace has had me on recently. The president was complaining about that. Right. Bill Hemmer, I think, is fair. And so, I've done a lot of the Fox shows, and I will continue to do so because, as I said, I want to communicate to everyone.
Right. What do we do with the election if Trump doesn't leave? I mean, I know I saw you tweet about it, maybe jokingly, but you were calling him President Snowflake. I think it was about the election, but he said this enough that I know he's just trying to poke the hornet's nest. But I feel like there's a bit of the real Trump coming through, and I feel like if he's got a chance, he's going to contest this and do what they did to not to Wellstone. Was it to Wellstone? I'm forgetting. No, it was Al Franken, wasn't it? That they held it up for 6 months. That they're going to do it writ large. They did it to Al Gore. I mean, it's
what we have to do. And so I played sports in college, and I remember whenever I complained about a ref, my coach would always tell me or my teammates, "Well, then don't make it close." And his point was, if you blow out the score, then it doesn't really matter what the ref is doing. And so I think while a majority should be enough in America, the pressure is on right now for Biden and Democrats to win big, because if we win big, then I think the president just leaves office, tail between his legs. He'll say it was rigged. He'll blame whoever.
Right.
But if it's close, that's where he could thrive and file frivolous lawsuits, welcome foreign interference to amplify discord, invite armed, camo-geared militiamen to bring their assault rifles to the Capitol to protect him. You can just imagine.
That's what I'm worried about. Yeah. Can you imagine those guys surrounding the White House?
Yeah,
absolutely. Imagine it. No. Yeah.
Yes. So if it's not close, then I think he'll see the writing on the wall. If it's close, that's where, as you said, he can thrive in the chaos. So let's not let it be close.
Right. The best way to avoid it is just to trounce him. What do we do about Russia? And I don't just mean right now, but I mean, let's just assume Biden wins.
No.
We've got such a huge problem with them, and not just in terms of the elections, but I think because they've been given the bounties on our troops in Afghanistan. Yeah. They've gotten the run of the house. And what do we do? I mean, of all things, I think, remember under Romney, not under Romney, but when Romney ran, we kind of laughed when he said Russia was the number one threat. And I don't know if they're the number one threat, but they're a way bigger threat than I think we realized 8 years ago.
You have to directly confront them, something the president has been unwilling to do. They understand one language, other than Russian, and that's the language of force. And you have to tell them they're not going to interfere again. We want them out of our democracy. They will not be welcome at the table of nations until they start acting responsibly, and that will work in a class action with other countries who have been victims before, and we'll stitch together a coalition to hold them accountable. And the president, instead of aligning with traditional allies to counter Russia, he has insulted those allies and drawn himself closer to countries like Russia and countries that are similar to Russia, like Turkey, the Philippines, North Korea. So that's how you deal with Russia. They punch way above their weight. A country that has limited natural resources beyond oil and gas. It's an oligarchy, where if you're not at the very top, you're not doing very well. And we can, I think, exploit that, insist that the Russians demand better of their leadership, but you have to be aligned with other countries who are victims of Russian aggression.
Well, I think John McCain called them, I think it was McCain, a gas station with nukes. Basically meaning they've got oil, but they don't have much else, and nuclear weapons, but their army is nothing like what it used to be. But I was going to ask you something else about Russia with what do you think, what's Trump's deal with Russia? What do you think is really going on? It doesn't make sense.
I can tell you what we know, right? We know that
you're on House Intel Committee, although you obviously can't speak about things for the committee.
But I'll just say, using common sense, he has done multiple business deals throughout his career with Russia. He's been granted trademarks, in Russia. Up until June of 2016, he was trying to do, the largest, hotel deal in Russia, and then he lied about it. And I think that's telling. Whenever you conceal something like that, I think it goes to a consciousness of guilt. So he's invested in Russia. Russia has invested in him. Of course, the Miss Universe contest was hosted in Russia. And so whether the motives are personal, political, financial, we just know that he's done a lot of business with them. He's lied about the work that he's done with them. And most importantly, as president of the United States, he continues to put their interests above ours. And that's no commander-in-chief that you'd want, presiding over a military, if you're a Blue Star mom and your kid's over in Afghanistan and there's credible evidence that the Russians are paying for bounties on the lives of U.S. soldiers, and the president won't stand up to that. And so I think he's going to pay a price for that. And we'll see what the Manhattan District Attorney's Office finds on his finances. The Mueller team was not able to look at it. The president and his team have stonewalled every subpoena that we've sent over around his finances. But to me, someone that didn't have anything to hide as far as working with Russia financially would just show us his taxes, and he refuses to do that.
How has he gotten away with it to date, though? I feel like if we had if we had a Democrat who had done the kind of things Trump has done, that, all right, you don't have to use the word treason, whatever word you want to use, but it's clearly co-opted by the Russians in terms of, and especially now, the Russians, Putin, at least credible reports that Putin has put a bounty on American troops in Afghanistan, and then the New York Times reported that it seems several troops may have been killed. And Trump does nothing about it. It's been, I think, 39 days, something like that the public has known. Trump probably knew since last year. He's done nothing about it. If a Democrat did this, we would have, Rick Wilson in the old days. We would have Rick Wilson and everybody else painting us as the biggest traitors on the planet. I could imagine Democrats standing up and calling for a Democrat to step down. I feel like sometimes our messaging, and again, I guess I'm asking you more as a messaging expert, because I think you're very good at this. Pelosi's good at it. Schiff is great, in terms of people on the House side. But overall, collectively, I feel like our messaging is very here and here and here and here. And especially like on the treason stuff. My God, how could a president get away with this stuff? Why isn't it resonating more?
I think with Donald Trump, you have to just stick to two simple messages. He's childish and he's corrupt. Sometimes, he's childishly corrupt, but that is the simplest message I think that resonates with most folks, and we shouldn't overcomplicate what he's trying to do. And if you really think about what does he do that bothers you, it falls into one of those two buckets. He's either acting childish or he's acting corruptly. But I think to most Americans, you have to tie that to them. And while I'll go to my grave believing that we had a righteous case to impeach him for leveraging taxpayer dollars, that were supposed to go to Ukraine to try and get Ukraine to help in his election. For most Americans, and while a majority supported impeachment, they weren't in the streets, marching for impeachment every day, as you see in some democracies, when they want to see a leader thrown out. And I think it was a complicated topic. But now you look at a pandemic where we're all affected. Our livelihood's been affected. Our kids aren't going to school. Business as we know it, is shut down. And you can point to the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, not taking it seriously. And I think, John, we elect presidents not for what they do during the good times, but for how they handle and lead through the bad times. And this is kind of what he was supposed to do. I mean, his job was to, as president, you're supposed to be the leader during a crisis like this, and he's been completely, he's fumbled every handoff and dropped every pass. And I think that's ultimately why he's going to lose re-election. I don't think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be big. And the American people are going to want leadership.
Do you think it's going to
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, go on.
If you can't tell, I'm really optimistic.
I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, clearly we're winning right now, but obviously 2016 sticks in my craw and sticks in everybody's craw. It was bizarre that this guy could win, and frankly, it's the same argument today. How the hell could this guy win? And guess what? He did it once. I mean, and we've been there before anyway. Bush was the same thing, just to a degree. After Bush won the first time, and we said he stole the election, then America voted for him again. You can't write that one off. No, but I agree with you. I think we've got to be optimistic, but trust me, everybody I deal with, on the activist side knows that there's no way in hell we're taking this for granted. Bill Barr, so you had a real sparring match with him, was a week or two ago in the committee. Yet another, and I was sort of asking our podcast followers for questions, and one of them was asking, should we impeach Bill Barr right now?
I believe we should have. I believe we should have impeached him before Donald Trump for the way he mischaracterized the Mueller report, the way he misled Congress when he was asked about the Mueller report when he testified. But here we are, as I said, 90 days before the election. I think we need to continue to hold Barr and the Trump administration accountable, shine a light wherever we see corruption, and then post Donald Trump, as I said, have a presidential crimes commission. So this is one where I would say, the luxury of time, if we had that, yes, I would be more forcefully, calling for that. But right now, I think all of my energy should be spent mobilizing people from the town squares and the town halls to march on the ballot boxes.
What kind of things could your commission do? I'm just curious. I'm getting back to that, but what are the kind of fixes? Because I look at this and I say, the Constitution is what sort of set up the system we've got. And guess what? The Constitution, we didn't realize, was more of a comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y, shaking hands. We all sort of agree we're going to hold each other accountable. And if you don't control the Congress, then you're screwed. We found out. I mean, what kind of fixes could be on the table that we could consider to hold the president more accountable, to preserve congressional powers of subpoena, et cetera?
I think make it a crime for any president to accept an emolument, a gift from a foreign leader. The Constitution says you can't do it, but it's not a crime, and there's really no relief that the law provides, when someone's doing it. Get rid of this crazy idea that a president cannot be indicted. I think we need to scrap that DOJ policy. Have, as I said, better protections for whistleblowers. And as you pointed out, you called it a comity. I call it the honor code, which is that you have the rule of law, which is enshrined in the federal code, which we all follow, hopefully. And then you have the honor code, which is just kind of a gentle person's agreement that you're going to abide by certain traditions, customs, decorum. And the president has violated all of them. You don't put your kids in positions of power at the White House and give them security clearances. You bypass the regular process for them to get that. You turn over your taxes, right? So requiring every future presidential candidate to show their taxes. So there's so much we're going to have to do that he's exposed. And I'm confident the country is going to want us to do it in a bipartisan way. And I think we can find a home for a lot of these never Trumpers, who are going to need a place to go. This would be a good thing to work on.
Right. How long is it going to take us to recover, you think, from coronavirus economic? And I mean the economic impact, not the virus itself. But I'm very worried about what's coming next in terms of, people not being able, what am I looking for here? The way these things build on each other, right? People can't pay their rent, but guess what? Even though a lot of people on the left don't like landlords are business people too. So landlords can be mom and dad that have an extra apartment. Now mom and dad can't afford their mortgage. I think of my grandfather. My grandfather owned a city block in Chicago, Greek immigrant, right? Came here in the early 1900s, owned an entire city block with his brother in Chicago, lost the entire thing in the Depression because the tenants couldn't pay the rent. And he couldn't pay the bank. They lost everything. And then just started again from scratch. And I worry about all of that building.
So do I.
But I mean, I worry about individuals and their rents, but I worry about also these businesses that can't get the rents, and then they lose their buildings, and all of a sudden then they fire their employees, and you have this cyclical unemployment in a way that keeps growing. And do we get back from it anytime in 10 years? The Depression, right? The Depression went on for what? Until World War II, basically. That World War II snapped us out of it.
And so, John, that's why I believe we can't spend enough right now to get out of this, whether it's the relief, of giving people an economic bridge to the other side, or it's the recovery in creating jobs in, rural broadband, or, wind and solar and fuel cells to, reduce our carbon emissions. As I said earlier, infrastructure needs, put people to work, invest in building something better. And that's what the future will look like. But we have to get the healthcare crisis right first. I believe we have the resiliency for the economy to come back in a way that is more, fair for all Americans. But if we don't get this virus under control, forget about it.
What, I wanted to ask you too, I know you had said you had about a half an hour, so I think we may have 5 minutes more. Your presidential run, I was for Pete. Biden was fine.
I like Pete.
I like Pete, but I always said Biden was fine. But I like Pete. But I said good things about you, by the way, in our podcast as well.
You did.
I did. But I also said I had the feeling you jumped in way too late. You might have been like the 22nd Democrat, I want to say, that came in.
Yeah.
So the field was way too crowded, and there was just no way you could get your. I think there was no way you could get your message out at that point. You know, I mean, who else? Remember,
no, I think
a couple. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
I think about that. So I ran because I wanted to be a champion on the issues of the next generation. You know,
what got you into? Why did you even come in so late at that point? What got you to say, you know what, I'm still going to try with such a crowded?
So I was so focused on helping us win the House, and so you know, the speaker had asked me to lead an effort to try and elect young people. So we called it Future 40. We found 40 candidates in their 40s and under running in the most flippable seats. 29 of them won, and so I traveled to their states and, you know, helped them with volunteer efforts to get out the vote. And so after the election, you know, I jumped in around April, but, you know, standing up the new majority, going into the investigations on Intel and the Judiciary Committee, they consumed a lot of time. And, you know, thinking back on it, because I do ask myself, what would it look like if I jumped in January?
Right.
I guess I would say, because Mayor Pete got in a couple months before I did. And I think of all the candidates, he occupied the lane that I had wanted the most.
Right.
However, when you look at, you know, where Mayor Pete, you know, ended up at the end of the race, you know, he was still kind of polling in, you know, the high single digits, low double digits. And so if I think it through, like if I had been able to occupy Mayor Pete's lane by getting in a few months earlier, I still think no matter what happened, it just wasn't a generational election. And so, I mean, Mayor Pete, I mean, gosh, I mean, Rhodes Scholar, Midwest, veteran. I mean, he had, you know, all of the pieces that you'd want, you know, in a profile to make a generational case. But I think the voters, again, being so anxious about a second Trump term, and this was what was expressed to me over and over, they wanted experience. And so I don't think it's a mistake that the last three candidates standing were Vice President Biden and Senators Sanders and Warren, you know, three most experienced candidates in the field.
Right. No, and I think that's what made it really hard, is because we had such good candidates. And even beyond them, I liked a lot of the candidates, but those three, I mean, to a degree, and Pete did this, and your race may have just begun to do it. You know, Pete put his name on the map so he can try again next time. And I assume, are you going to try again next time, or at least is it open for discussion? I mean, you haven't foreclosed running again, have you?
No, and the truth is, the advice I give my interns when they ask, like, how do I run for office? How do I get into office? Is to not run for office, but to run for issues, and you'll find the right office. And for me, as I said, gun violence was the lead issue that I ran on, and I thought having the majority in the House, we would need, you know, a president that would make that a top issue. And so, you know, I was drawn, you know, to that opportunity. So we'll see. I still want to serve those issues, and I think the best offices will, or the best ways will present themselves. But right now, I think there's a lot of good work to do in the House, and if we win that holy trinity, as I said, you know, I see a real opportunity in the first 100 days to pass the most sweeping, you know, gun safety legislation ever, and really make a mark.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I mean, maybe just out the door on gun issues. You know, and too bad Cliff isn't here, because Cliff has worked a long time on gun issues. I've done a little bit of working on it, but do you really think we can make a difference? I think for a lot of us, we feel like, you know, how many massacres can this country have every year before people say enough is enough? And it kind of feels like they're never going to say enough is enough.
I think we already are. And this March for Our Lives generation, they're still coming of age. They've not fully made their mark at the ballot box. They will soon. But in the 2018 midterms, you know, candidates were not running away from the issue of gun safety. They were running on that issue. And more money was spent by, you know, gun groups who wanted gun safety measures than by the NRA. And so I do see a change happening, not as fast as I would like as a parent, you know, with two young kids who, you know, go to school and you want them to be safe. But I do think that it's going to happen. It's going to happen before, you know, the end of this new decade. And it's going to look a lot different for my kids than the children before them who've had to suffer through these, you know, mass shooting exercises.
Yeah. If we ever get them all back to school.
So,
I know.
Well, thank you for this, John.
This was great. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. And you know, good luck in everything. But obviously, in the fall, hopefully, we're all gonna win. And the next year we can fight about the details. Which will be
confidence
fun.
inspires confidence. So
absolutely,
we have all the reason in the world to be confident.
All right. Thanks, Congressman. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, John.